Lore of the Old World, Chapter 7, The Southern Kingdoms. Though the Empire, Britannia, and Kislev stand preeminent among the realms of men that lie to the west of the World's Edge Mountains, they are far from the only kingdoms in the Old World. To the south lie numerous smaller countries, many as old, if not older, than the lands of Sigmar and the Brittoni, and all powerful in their own right. There are few human realms outside of the northern wastes as perilous as the border princes. Named for the countless exiled lords and ladies that claim corners of the region as their own, it has existed for hundreds of years on the frontier between the civilized lands of the Old World and the southern wilderness of the Badlands. Filled with dismal crumbling towns and cities, often overlooked by a ruinous keep or castle, the people of the border princes live hard lives under an endless succession of masters, the names of which can sometimes change from one day to the next. But the border princes is also a land of adventure and opportunity. Many come to the lawless region to make their fortunes, either by selling their skills as mercenaries in the armies of its multitudinous rulers, or by picking over the centuries of ruins, crypts, and tombs left behind by ancient empires and forgotten kings. Others come to escape justice in their homelands, fleeing ahead of outraged monarchs, furious magistrates, and angry mobs. All hope to leave behind the headsman's axe or the hangman's noose and forget the crimes and misdeeds of their ignoble past. Straddling the border between civilization and wilderness, the border princes are riven with orc and beastman tribes and beset by armies of the restless dead, to name but a few of its numerous perils. Unlike the great nations of the Old World, its settlements do not enjoy the protection of state-sponsored armies or crusading knights, and must instead rely upon the personal retinues of militias of their lords and masters for security. Consequently, they live with the knowledge that at any time hostile armies might crest the nearby hills and descend upon them. Thus are the people of the border princes often as hard as the lands they inhabit, excepting that they must fight for everything they have, or join the countless generations of bones buried beneath their feet. The most fascinating detail of life in the border princes is the endless procession of rulers. Outcasts, criminals, and even the odd do-gooder who thinks of himself as the saviour of the South all come to the border princes because their own lands will not have them. Of course, carving out a piece of the border princes for your own personal kingdom is no small feat, and involves plenty of politicking, skullduggery, and a fair amount of violence. For this reason, the castles, towns, and fiefdoms of the border princes are constantly changing hands as one lord or other rises to power, only to be ousted or killed by the next. Occasionally, dynasties might arise, and, for a few glorious generations, a kingdom might endure. Inevitably, however, treachery, war, or simple misfortune befalls its ruler, and the cycle begins anew. The civil war in the empire has been good for the border princes, and many exiled nobles have found new alliances within its boundaries. Men like Karl Rachwald, the Hermit Prince, or Lord Gunther Dunkelmund, the Broken King, formerly of Reichland and Middenland respectively, make good money recruiting veteran soldiers from the region for the imperial patrons. Equally, the so-called Prince Jürgen Esselhafen, the Lord of Paupers, fights proxy wars in the name of Marienburg, his task to keep southern ports open for illegal trade. The empire is far from the only nation to benefit from the rogues inhabiting the border princes. Exiled Bretonnian knights such as Sir Cecil Gaston, the Black Knight, Adelaine Montu, the Cursed Maid of Moselon, or Sir Julien Poten, the Craven, have all been known to give shelter and aid to Bretonnian knights questing in the south. Some princes are even more brazen when it comes to their mercenary nature, such as the Tilean prince Fredo Tornodo, known as the Bastard Prince, or Carolina Aquilena, the Slayer of Queens. Estalian princes such as Deza Donalba, the Bloody Baron, or Lord Fulma Ortega, Don of the Red River, are barely more trustworthy, and only when dealing with their own kind. Then there are outsiders like Boyovaldos Uvvetovsk, the Oathbreaker, or Jarl Scalagrizon, the Thane of Crows, men best avoided for their dark deeds they are purported to have indulged in. That such cruel and ruthless outcasts rule in the border princes should be ample warning to any travellers that it pays to know whose lands you are blundering into. To outsiders, Tilea is a chaotic land of ever-changing alliances and nefarious rulers, a kingdom riven by constant civil war and treachery. In truth, it is a kingdom only in the eyes of its neighbours, for the nation of Tilea consists of loose alliance of rival city-states and their environs, all bound together by complex trade deals, brokered by cunning merchants, and a need for mutual protection fostered by powerful and wealthy families locked in generations-long vendettas with rivals. At times in its long history, Tilea has been a republic centered around the prosperous capital of Remus, though at such times its merchant lords have always tended to look to their own selfish interests, even whilst paying lip service to the idea of a united nation and a centralized government. Much to the horror of its northern neighbours, Tilea scorns the idea of nobility, and long ago did away with all the bother that can be caused by having kings and queens. Instead, it has cultivated mercantile dynasties, a family's power and position being built upon the extent of its trade and greed, rather than any notion of hereditary right to rule. Tileans are, and always have been, an inventive and adventurous people. While some would argue that they simply dabble in new technologies in order to discover new ways of further enriching themselves, it cannot be denied that many of the most fabulous inventions of the Old World were conceived and crafted in the workshops of world-renowned artisans in Remus, Pavona, Lucini, or one of the land's numerous other great cities. The people of Tilea are also known for being bold and adventurous explorers, though, once again, many would argue that this adventurous nature stems from a desire to discover hidden riches and find new peoples with whom to trade. Whatever the case, Tilean explorers have wandered far and wide across the face of the world and made many wondrous discoveries for the betterment of all the nations of man. Tileans were the first Old Worlders to reach the eastern empire of Grand Cathay by land, and the first to cross the great ocean and venture into the jungles of the New World, always returning with tales of wonders discovered. Whilst many of the merchant princes of Tilea employ large retinues of guards to protect their interests, none of the many city-states maintain standing armies, relying in times of need upon mercenary forces. These are recruited from the many mercenary regiments the nation is famed for, and are extremely well paid by merchant princes keen to secure their loyalty. These mercenaries are commonly known as the Dogs of War, and perhaps unsurprisingly, given their professional nature and desire to survive long enough to enjoy their pay, these armies can be most effective, both in the inter-city battles between the free cities and in seeing off invaders. Sometimes a merchant prince might even take it upon his or herself to lead a grand expedition to some far-flung region of the world, hiring a mercenary army to help them carve out a new Tilean outpost, usually for the purpose of setting up a lucrative trade route. In this way, Tilean ports have sprung up in Lustria, the Southlands, and as far away as the Dread Sea, all to serve the interest of one prince or another. Unfortunately for their masters, Dogs of War armies can be notoriously fickle, especially if the coin runs low or they receive a better offer. It is not unknown for an entire army to change its allegiance or even quit the field on the eve of battle, but most mercenary generals value their reputation enough that they have the decency to give their current employer a chance to make any outstanding payments or to counter an enemy's offer. Others might simply take their payment and disappear, safe in the knowledge that their would-be employer will not be around post-battle to complain of having been conned. Even more untrustworthy than the Dogs of War, though, equally rooted in the Tilean way of life, are the pirates of Sartosa. For hundreds of years, the large island off the southern coast of the Tilean peninsula has been a den of thieves and cutthroats of all stripes. These criminals have been a plague upon shipping from the Black Gulf to the Great Ocean and far beyond. Far from trying to stamp them out, many merchant princes consider the pirates their de facto navy, and will often pay for their services against their rivals and the enemies of Tilea itself. Estalia, according to its long and storied history, was the first land settled by humans in the Old World. From its dry and arid northern mountain ranges to its fertile southern coast, it is covered in a patchwork of ancient kingdoms and proud cities, the greatest of which are Bilbali in the north and Magrita in the south. The ruling families of these rival cities share a long and tangled history that stretches back over hundreds of years and involves a great many marriages, assassinations, and betrayals of trust. Though the people of Estalia seldom concern themselves with affairs beyond their own borders, the nation boasts an extensive coastline, many great ports, and is well noted for the skill of its sailors. Though most kingdoms employ only a small fleet of war vessels, hundreds of merchant ships sail daily from its harbours. Ships bearing the colours of the Estalian kingdoms are a common sight in ports from Barak-Var to Marienburg and far beyond. As a result, Estalia enjoys an important position as a merchant nation with goods from far-flung corners of the world flowing into and out of its many markets. Much like its fleet, the military might of Estalia is decentralized, comprising the personal retinues of its many kings, queens, and lesser nobles, each of whom is responsible for recruiting and maintaining their own armies, and in many cases small naval fleets. These armies exist to protect their homelands and those of their neighbours from aggression and invasion. Alliances between neighbours are common, but rarely do armies come together in significant numbers, only doing so in times of great need. Even so, Estalian regiments are well equipped with crossbow and pike, and extensively trained to fight in a style similar to that of the famed Tilean mercenary regiments. These regiments enjoy plentiful support from Estalia's numerous cavalry formations, most of which consist of young nobles mounted upon the finest war horses, the kingdoms of Estalia being famed for their quality of their steeds. Beside these ride Templar knights of several famous holy orders, such as the Knights of the Blazing Sun, a sophisticated order whose members study the science of warfare and excel in all of its many aspects, from pitched battle to lightning raids to siegecraft. Sheltered as it is to the north by the lands of Britannia and to the east by Tilea, the Empire and Kislev, Estalia has enjoyed a relatively peaceful existence when compared to other nations of the Old World. Even so, orcs, beastmen, and the undead have all plagued Estalia throughout its history. The former emerge regularly from the untamed Irana mountains and the wide tracts of forest that cling to the foothills, seeking war and destruction. The latter often come by sea from the distant land of the dead, to conquer in the name of long-forgotten kings, or emerge by night from the many tombs and barrows that lie scattered throughout the wilderness. One notable invasion into the heart of Estalia was that led by the vampire lord Nugal. The foul creature and his undead armies left devastation in their wake as they marched almost unopposed across the land, only to be stopped in the battle for Magritta, where some say the goddess Myrmidia, patron of the Estalians, appeared and personally destroyed the vampire, reducing him to ash with her divine light. Several times in history, Estalia has come under attack from and even been occupied by human invaders from neighbouring lands, in particular the Sultanates of Araby, an ancient and prosperous land that clings to the western edges of the great southern continent and stands among the southernmost outposts of humanity in the Old World. Several times has Araby turned its attention north across the sea towards the rich and fertile lands of Estalia, and warships have sailed from the great coastal cities to raid the coasts of Estalia. On more than one occasion, conquering Arabians have landed armies upon Estalian soil to besiege the castles of its kings and queens. As recently as the 15th century, as reckoned by the imperial calendar, invaders from across the waves conquered great parts of southern Estalia and formed their own kingdoms, some of which endured for decades before being driven back into the sea by foreign mercenary armies in the pay of the Estalians. These invasions have left their mark, and even today many of the noble lords and ladies that rule in Estalia's southern kingdoms are descended from those that once ruled as hostile invaders, albeit now under the colours of the Estalian kings.